What is going on, all you greasy little goblins? Today we're going to be going over all the Earth's Phase spells and ranking them to see which ones are the best and which ones hit as hard as a wet spaghetti noodle. So if you enjoy content like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future videos, as we will be going over all the other elements over the next few days. So no more stalling, let's get into the rest of this video. So then the very first starting spell, the second you load into the game for the Earth Phase, is going to be Rock Spike. It summons rock pillars in front of you, which they will explode and knock away enemies upon impact. This spell is basically a worse version of a spell that we're going to be going over later, but it's not bad either way. Here, let me go over why. The damage on this spell is, for like just being the starter spell, it actually isn't bad at all. For a low spirit cost of only 330, and then its damage output for almost like 200 damage on the just basic mobs, is actually really surprising. The main downside to it is actually how small the attack is, because you have to be right up in the enemy's face for it to actually even hit them with this. It has such a tiny hitbox, it's kind of awkward trying to actually damage enemies at times. But then, for this spell in PvP, it's actually not really anything special, honestly. The low damage isn't really worth it, and on top of the small hitbox, especially when there's just a better version of the spell that, once again, we'll go over later, stop worrying about it, chill. But overall, this spell isn't bad, and it's still not great, but to use it as the beginning spell of the game, it's actually pretty good, honestly. The damage alone can carry you for quite a while, so I'd put it in like either a high B tier, low A tier, but yeah, it's still respectable B. The next spell is Enhanced Defense, which makes it so for a certain period of time, you receive less damage from enemies and will not be flinched except for some powerful attacks, aka nothing but unblockable attacks really. But this spell itself is actually awesome for getting extra tankiness and not constantly being knocked around from enemies hitting you. It's absolutely amazing. In PvP, this spell is absurdly powerful. Not being able to be flinched is extremely strong because that means even for your attacks, if an opponent deflects them, you won't be set off balance like you normally would whenever you get deflected from an attack. So it can turn you into a spam machine essentially. For PvP, definitely easily an S tier, but that also brings me to like the overall tier, which is slightly affected for only one reason. So let's say you pop this buff and an enemy knocks you out of spirit and you're stuck in that panting animation from being in negative spirit. Well, normally, if you get hit in this panting animation, you just get knocked on the floor, you get iframes, nothing is allowed to hit you anymore, right? Well, if you have Enhanced Defense on, that hit won't flinch you whenever you are in that panting state, meaning you'll be stuck in that state while the enemy can just wail on you and you have to just sit there and take it. So just because of that instance, I'm putting this spell in the A category, but most of the time you won't have to deal with that, but there's definitely been a few times that's happened to me, and it's very annoying because like I said, you have to sit there and take it. But still an easy A, so that thing is still amazing. The next spell that we're going to be going over is called Mighty Shockwave, which unleashes a shockwave around you that will blow away nearby enemies. This spell is really nice for a group of mobs to do a lot of damage to really quickly. On top of knocking them away, spreading them away from you, it's really nice. On normal mobs, it's very powerful with a decently low spirit cost, so it's great to use against those base mobs you see in the game. But obviously against larger enemies, it's okay, especially ones that are resistant to earth, like these larger Oni type enemies that you see. So against them, it's kinda meh. In PvP, it's honestly nothing too crazy or special. It's nice for clearing away your opponent if you're like surrounded by them and their AI for just a quick AoE, but the damage on it is so low, really isn't worth it. Even as a wake up spell after you get a critical blow, it doesn't do enough. Still, I'd still put it in the B tier in my opinion. It's still not bad, great for clearing mobs. Then for the next spell is going to be Quakebound. Essentially, it just makes it so every time you deflect, you build up stone ailment on your enemy. Once it reaches max, it applies heaviness onto them, which reduces their resistances to lightning, increases spirit damage received, and decreases the amount of spirit they gain from attacking or deflecting. It's not like a bad spell, just might only be useful on specific builds meant to constantly knocking out an enemy in spirit. Perhaps. To me, it could be useful, but not something that I'd personally use, but I can understand it can be useful with the right build, so I'll be putting it in the C category. After that, we're getting into a spell called Stone Weapon, which, as I say in every one of these videos, elemental weapon builds will always be S tier, because extra damage is always goated as long as you're using the one correct element against a specific weakness. So, always S tier, those spells are amazing. The next spell is Rock Toughness, which this will be a quick one. It reduces spirit damage received from enemy attacks and makes it so the next time you lose a morale rank from a critical blow, you won't lose that morale rank. It's pretty useless, I'll be real with you. Not really worth the spell slot in my opinion, easy D tier sadly. And since we're already down in the D tier, we might as well continue with this trend. So our next spell is going to be Deathly Bog, which creates a bog in the nearby area. The bog will cause damage over time to enemies touching it, and it will decrease their movement speed. The damage over time is basically worthless, barely ticks for any damage. The radius is small and slow, and enemies doesn't really do much, to me at least. It's okay in PvP, but smart players won't really just sit there and be slowed in the bogs for more than a second, so also going to be a D tier spell. And then next on the list of spells is going to be Sandsink, which generates a whirlpool of sand that draws enemies into this center. The damage on it is okay for tiny mobs, but if it doesn't really insta-kill them as you're pulling a horde of enemies into you, then you can be there for a bad time. It won't affect the big Oni looking enemies, so it's kinda useless on them. In PvP, the damage isn't bad, and the pull can annoy players trying to like run away from you or avoid you. Overall though, only because the damage is still pretty okay, I'm at least going to put it in the C tier. Now for the big daddy spell, Imposing Slab. Remember the first rock spell that I told you about, the rock spike? Yeah, this is the bigger, better brother. So it generates rock pillars in front of you that linger temporarily and then explode when enemies touch them. So it looks like a damaging defensive wall basically. The hitbox on them is massive and the damage on this spell is outrageous. Even on enemies who aren't weak to earth, it still does a huge amount of damage. The main downside is that it has a high spirit cost of 671, but weaving in deflect with this spell will allow you to spam it no problem. In PvP, it's amazing. If you're low on health and you can pop this out as a damaging wall to give you that space that you need to heal, and it is a powerful move to use as a wake up attack after a critical blow. Definitely one of the most powerful spells in the Earth Tree, and one of the hardest hitting spells in the whole game, which easily lands it in the S tier category. The next spell is going to be Force Blow, which unleashes an attack using the power of Earth Phase. Basically, you just swipe your hand in front of you and do some earth damage as you bitch slap enemies. Does a ton of damage and can kinda be spammed with its low spirit cost of only 285. Definitely caught me off guard as I thought this spell was actually going to hit like ass. But in PvP, definitely hits like a truck, but has a really awkward hitbox to it. If you do land it, it'll do like half an opponent's HP, but it's a little funky. I don't think it's a bad spell, but it just feels awkward using it, if that makes any sense. Damage is an A tier, but the use to it feels like a B tier. If it didn't feel so clunky, easy A tier. But yeah, for that, B tier. Well then, I think it's time to get into the other big lads of the Earth Phase tree. The next spell is going to be Lion's Roar, which lets out a shout that generates a shockwave. Enemies hit by this will be forced to lock onto you. also decreases damage taken from enemies for a certain period of time. There's also a hidden effect on this, which makes it absolutely broken. I'm not sure if this is a glitch or not. It could be, they haven't patched it yet, so we'll just go with it. On top of being super tanky, this spell makes it so anytime you take a critical blow from an enemy in PvP, it will do 0 damage to you, which is beyond overpowered. It's definitely best for PvP because of that, but regardless, stackable defense bonus with enhanced defense still easily puts it in the S tier category. Illusionary Shell is going to be our next spell, which creates an invisible shield around you that absorbs a certain amount of damage, which looking at it, it only really actually absorbs a measly 60 damage before breaking, which is like maybe 1 free hit in PvP, but for a whopping 965 spirit cost, it's not even close to being worth it just to save you 60 extra damage. Hell no, D tier. This thing is trash. And then now down to the most fun spell in the entire game being Boulder Knuckles. This spell imbues you with the power of Earth Phase and allows you to perform a frontal jab. The attack deals more damage to how much health you have left. So, the lower your HP, the higher the damage. This spell outright with being at full health already hits like an absolute truck, but the second you drop to around half HP, it almost 5 times the damage. Does 5 times more damage. This spell is ridiculously good, and just the lower your health gets, it's just going to be doing even more and more and more. So I love builds like these, high risk, high reward. For PvP, same thing, stupidly strong, just get your health like really low, knock your opponent out of spirit, get your free hit with this for a quick and easy one shot. Stupidly overpowered spell in both PvP and PvE, S tier, easy. Now we are down to the final spell in the Earth phase, which is going to be Fiend Vanquisher. It allows you to charge forward using the power of our Earth phase. You will not falter while charging unless an enemy hits you with a very powerful attack, aka you get hyper armor during this attack. Additionally, you move farther the longer you hold down the input for the spell. The spell itself does pretty decent damage, but it just wastes your entire spirit bar for like no reason. So, in my opinion, it's not enough damage for the cost of the spirit. If it did less damage, but used up significantly less of your spirit bar, I think then it might be worth something. You might not be able to burst someone down as fast, but spirit is too important to just give up like that. So, to me it's definitely between a high D or a low C tier because it has its uses, just not very often. But that's going to do it for this tier list. Let me know what you guys think about it in the comments down below, and let me know what you would all change on this tier list, if anything should go higher or lower than where I at least place them. Anyways, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good one.